Okay.
Chris?
How's it? Yeah, well, I'm honored to be here with you guys, and yeah, just well, met Belinda for the first time via Zoom, and very honored to be in the company of one of our permaculture leaders in the country.
Is that a new word, Chris?
Sorry?
Is that a new word that you've just coined?
Permaculture leader. Yeah, well, yeah, I think it's maybe one, you know, one of the things that I've been sort of battling with is trying to understand through all the, you know, there's quite a lot of definitions for permaculture. Belinda, what is your, if you have to summarize it?
How long do I have?
Yeah.
You know what? There's so many different things that have come through, and everybody seems to be adding on it. And if you go back to the father or the founder of permaculture, old Bill Mollison, he said it was a holistic way of working with nature and farming. And I think that pretty much sums it up. It's the holistic way. It's not, and it's easy. Everybody says it's so difficult, but it's not. It's easy living. I find it's far easier than town living. I mean, we don't rely on municipal water, and we've built something now to take us off the grid with regards to electricity. But it's easy living, and it's going back to old ways that will last generations to come. And I think farms or farming communities were built like that long ago. I mean, if you go back to old farms, they built dams and structures, things to last a lifetime. Instead of in now and, you know, oh, in 10 years, don't worry, we'll knock that building down and replace it. No, you know, you have to work and you build it to last for generations to come. And it's the same thing with permaculture. You build something to last. You decide, oh, you're going to plant that tree, and in 5 years' time, oh shit, that tree was planted in the wrong place. So it's lots is done on design work. If you've done your design correctly, your design can change, yes, but once you've started, you just grow from there. So design is really important. Design for your property. I know Lynn Dee's excited to get her property designed. But it's using everything. You know, we don't say no to aquaponics culture, hydroponics. You don't say no to it. You see how you can incorporate it into your system in a big way.
Yeah. Well, I think what I'm appreciating, and I'm sort of I'm at week 10 of my 52-week permaculture online course. So I really still very much in the beginning phase of understanding around it. But what I appreciate is the focus around sustainable processes, and what I've been doing, well, since lockdown, is looking at my own house in an urban environment, and yes, I mean, concepts like homesteading and whatever has been going on for quite a time, but this is the perfect opportunity to really assess your own home from a permaculture point of view. What can you plant? Make sure you don't generate any waste. Make sure you optimize the margins and the fringes, and you know, so many of the permaculture principles. And you know, that's sort of more, well, what I'm excited about is well, two things. One is that personally, I'm not very bullish about, you know, the big scale commercial chemical agriculture sectors being the solution for food security. I'm very bullish about sustainable permaculture actually being the solution for food security. And what one's seeing is all the more evidence that you know, even urban farming yes, with urban farming, you can't really compete against, grain stuff and potatoes and obviously livestock and so on. But you can compete very effectively on leafy greens. And even if it's just for, complementing your diet or your grocery list for own consumption, there's a huge opportunity for that, in my opinion.
You hit the nail.
Lynn dee, what's your view?
If you start from your home and you work out, because in permaculture you have different zones. We talk about zone 0, which is yourself, which is you as a person,
Yeah.
and then zone 0 is your home, and that's where the heart is. That's where it starts. So you go from there and you work your way out to zone 5, and there's now talk of a zone 6. But that's where you start. You can't start from a zone 5 and then decide to work back to your home, because by the time you've done that, your home would have malfunctioned.
Yeah.
So you start with your home, you start with the heart. And so we have it that there was, if you want to Google somebody who was an inspiration for me, was Masanobu Fukouka. He was the man who did
One Straw Revolution. Yes.
Brilliant book to read if you ever have the time to read it. And he said, on rainy days, you stay inside and write poetry.
Yeah.
And that's how we should think. Our gardens should be sustainable enough that on rainy days or miserable days, or if you have a flu day or whatever, you stay inside and you work on your home then. Then you do your sourdough breads and your pickling and your bottling and your jams and whatever. You don't say, oh, on Friday, I'm going to just stay inside and do it. No, you wait until you can't do something outside to move inside to do it. And that's where the balance has to come in, I think. The only good thing about, no, I shouldn't say the only good thing. The good thing about permaculture is that your systems eventually take care of themselves. So we have a food forest that we planted up maybe 8 or 9 years ago. And I mean, the fruit just comes through. If you don't harvest it, the monkeys or the birds would harvest. But you go in there and you harvest it. It doesn't need your input except for chopping and dropping and some cleaning up maybe once every year. So systems eventually start looking after themselves, and then you sit back and you reap the benefits of it. But the whole thing about permaculture is not to supply on a commercial basis. It's to teach people how to be sustainable and how to grow their own from a sustainable point of view. Everybody has land or a wall or a space that they can work from. I mean, we've got lots of open spaces, parks, community parks, verges, things like that. If we use those, if we maximize that, can you imagine how much fresh produce there would be out there? And good, or isn't it? Is the living off the land, trying to be sustainable. If you take groceries out of your monthly budget, you're saving a hell of a lot of money.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think many of the activities, and one of the things that I sort of encourage people to do through the urban farming dynamics platform is be meticulous about what you harvest in that regard, and put a value to it, because then suddenly you start realizing, oh my goodness, I'm actually this is a very sustainable way of doing it,
Yeah.
But if you just harvest it and you compare it, to maybe another product that you lose the value.
Yeah.
You should really understand that it can actually prevent you from spending a good 3,000 to 5,000 rand a month just by using your immediate homestead environment in a sustainable permaculture method.
And what the biggest thing is that consumers go out there and they buy groceries, and 9 out of 10 times the groceries will go off before they even use them. So fresh produce, so like lettuce or cucumber or tomatoes or something like that, will actually go off. Where if you harvest from your garden for every meal that you make, you're always harvesting fresh, and there's no better refrigerator or storage unit than your garden. So you let the plant survive, and you actually only harvest what you need for that meal or for the next day or so. And that's a big thing. I find if you can learn how to harvest sustainably, then you'll always have food. You'll always have something growing. But it's going out there and chopping down the whole spinach plant where spinach can grow for a year, 2 years. You can always harvest spinach if you harvest correctly. Also, the thing is to not want something that's not in season.
Yeah.
They're always, the good one was strawberries in July. Strawberries don't grow in July. They grow in December. You know, that's when we have strawberries. But the consumer out there doesn't see that. They want lemons all year round. No, lemons aren't all year round. And this is when we start playing with nature, and nature, she kicks back every now and again. Eh? She gives us, she says, hang on, stop now. This is not what I intended. And this is why in permaculture, you learn from nature. Even the change in seasons. Good one is always garlic. They always say you plant your garlic when your earth is cold. I don't know when you plant your garlic, Chris, but
yeah.
Have you got your garlic in?
Yeah, I actually I don't do a lot of garlic. It's not one of the lines that I'm doing full time, but I agree with you. It's
yeah, we've got vampires. We've got lots of vampires around, so we've got to plant lots of garlic. Did I say East London or Transylvania? I'm not too sure.
Okay.
So they always say you plant your garlic when your earth is cold. And I see lots of these sowing seed guides come up and they say, plant your garlic in February or March. February or March, we're still warm. We're too warm to plant our garlic still. Wait, I've only just planted my garlic 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I'll wait until it really gets crisp down here and then I plant it. But it can't go any more to the months of the year to determine your seasons. You've got to observe, and that's one of our design principles. The first one is observe and interact. If you observe, you'll notice that certain things bloom at certain times of the year, and that's the indication of the change in season. It's not anymore, oh, well, September marks spring, so let's go for it. It's not like that anymore. It's still too windy. We still have wind down. September, October, that's when October we'll normally start planting trees and fruit trees and things like that. So you have to, it's a change. You have to change your thinking.
So if I can add to that, Belinda, what I've seen coming from the shop's perspective is we brought up in a very competitive way. So even in growing our vegetable, we need to compete against something, but we have to let go of that mindset. And coming back, one of the things that you said is coming back to the heart. And what is it that wants to manifest between you, if I can use that word for lack of a better word? What is it, the energy that if you're creating like your garden, you don't have to worry what is Saniki doing on that side, but you're creating something that wants to move for you, something that wants to, I don't know if that makes sense what I'm saying. This is very holistic approach.
It is.
And if you had to go back, I have this saying, if they say, if a fisher can't fish, you fix the gear before going into the harvest, right? And you mentioned that where you're doing poetry and stuff like that. What I've seen from myself as well, being a consumer, being on both sides, is we want strawberries today because we want to make a pudding today. So it's like you said, it's a mindset that we need to let go, because if you don't get the potato this size or this shape, you're not happy from a consumer.
But you know what's happened, Lynn dee, is that we've lost touch. There's been a generation gap. So instead of learning from the elders, where they would say, you know, you take your potatoes out and you store them, and when the potatoes are finished, you go to yams or you go to whatever else is out there. We expect it to be all year round, where it's not. It's not all year round.
Totally.
And you know, with us, and they came to do a permaculture course, and at first I was quite these Buddhist monks come in and they said we couldn't cook their food, so I said, well, then you guys are going to have to cook all our food for us. And there was such an amazing group of people, and they taught me to only eat what's in season. And if we go back to that, if consumers go back to only wanting or eating what's in season. Now, my late mom, she would always say to me, do you know why we get lemons in winter? And I'd say, no, Mom, tell me why we get lemons in winter. And she said, well, you need the vitamin C. And that's exactly it. I mean, that's the older generation coming through that wisdom. It's just, you need your citrus because it gives you the vitamin C to see you through the winter cold. And we don't see that anymore. We've detached ourselves from what nature's providing us or showing us.
So, touching base on today. Sorry, Chris, do you want to add something?
Yeah, maybe we're gonna say more or less the same thing. I don't know, but what I've got a huge desire to. I've been studying a little bit on the ancient, well, not ancient, like C Louis Leipoldt. He did quite an amazing study in the 1930s on sort of Cape cooking and the culinary origins, etc., etc. And I think there's a big opportunity for, you know, going back to that, maybe, you know, saying, in short, what I'm trying to say is I'd love to be part of something where we create well, maybe a cookbook or whatever, you know, but sort of based on, you know, maybe the 52 weeks of the year, but in short, the aim is to make sure that you eat fresh, local, seasonal.
So I'm one step
what
ahead
your
of you.
views on that? Sorry?
I'm one step ahead of you. So,
wow, okay.
About a year and a half ago, I started doing a book on permaculture for South Africa, where it was taking different provinces and different biomes and trying to do a permaculture book for that, because you buy a permaculture book and it would say to you, plant legumes, and they would give you a list of nitrogen fixing trees or whatever, but it would be specific to your area. So everybody would go out and want invasive species or species that wouldn't grow. So anyway, I started doing that, and then about 8 months I started, I think I mentioned it to you, Lynn dee, about a book on homesteading. But to go out and actually harvest from indigenous trees and indigenous fruits and things like that, and making preserves based on that, but from a natural point of view. So using what you have, not trying to go out and actually buying pectin and whatever, trying to use it, whatever we have. And I found it so interesting because, so my mom passed away about a month, just over 2 months ago. And she left me a whole lot of old recipe books. Now we were talking about her today actually, because her grandparents came out, they were German Jews, believe it or not. And they settled in South Africa, and I've got all their old recipe books of indigenous plants that they grew to make beer and fermentation and all of that. And if we actually grew those indigenous plants that we've actually lost, we would actually be able to sustain our homestead with no problem whatsoever. But it's too easy for us to go to the shop and buy a beer instead of brewing your own. I mean, she makes ginger beer. And now, over the last few months, I've made some homemade ginger beer, and it's delicious. It's different. So you never know what's going to happen with that one batch of ginger beer, but it's the easiest recipe under the sun. It's not, you don't need a distill and a brewery or anything like that. You do it in your kitchen and it's done. I wanted to do, well, I've started doing that, actually bringing those recipes back into cycle again, so that people can see that it was done so many years ago, and those people survived hardships. So we've got a life of luxury at the moment compared to what they had, and if they can do it, can't we do it now?
Just
maybe we should collaborate on that.
Well, I'm very keen for collaboration on that, Lynn dee. Just a sideline note before you say something. Just coincidentally, I spent most of yesterday brewing a batch of beer, and the interesting thing is that I got the rhizome from a farmer in George that I passed by 2 years ago, and I planted it in a aquaponics, 1,000 square liter or one cubic meter
Yes.
of aquaponics. Basically yielded the hops and the barley. I obviously harvested the hops earlier and dried it and so on, and I only got to making the beer yesterday. But the point that I want to make is, in an urban environment with 1 cubic meter of aquaponics, you can make your own beer.
Exactly.
Only had to buy the yeast. That's it.
Yeah. But like I said, it becomes too easy. Oh, I'll just go buy jam from a supermarket. I made jams, I'm not joking. I made jams for days. We had so many grapes at one stage that they were literally falling on your head. So I made grape jam. And then I have a lovely lady that worked for me, and she would come in and she would, on her way into work, she would harvest all these indigenous fruits and she would plonk them on my kitchen table, and she'll say, I said, what is this for? And she would say, no, you're going to make jam from this. I said, oh, really now? She says, yes, come, let's make jam. And then you actually have to be like, okay, well, if I can make this from grapes, surely I can make it from any other fruit. And it's basically the same. You don't change your recipe. You just change your So, I'm quite a medicinal lady. I like medicinal plants as well. So the whole thing was to get back into medicinal plants. And we obviously know about this COVID-19 and all of that. And one of the local nurseries contacted me the other day and she said, I know you'll have this plant. And I was like, what are you talking about? She said she doesn't know how she pronounces it, but she says it's Artemisia afra. Do you know what Artemisia afra is?
No, why is it the African potato?
No. They call it mhlonyani. The Xhosas call it mhlonyani. So I said, oh yes, mhlonyani. She said, yes. She said, what do you use it for? I said, well, the minute you have a chest ailment, you make this tea, but it is disgusting. It smells like disinfectant. It's really vile. But it's one of those plants that we've just always planted, and I like my indigenous plants. And she said, I would pay you for cuttings. I said, what are you wanting cuttings for of this mhlonyani? She says, I've now found out that this, with a whole mixture of other herbs, would help with COVID. And I said, but this is the whole thing, is that if we had this in our diet to start off with, if we constantly had medicinal plants from your garden or whatever, you wouldn't have to then go out to find this plant to help in case you get it. You would have it in your diet to do away. So so maybe what you should do, Lynn dee, is your next thing is we should maybe do outside videoing on how to do a herbs.
Lynn dee, what is your let's just go back to saying, well, if we want to collaborate on a let's call it, whether it's a cookbook or a permaculture a handbook or a homesteading handbook, or I don't know actually exactly what the topic is, but I think the important thing is I like what we've got so far is the notion of sustainable farming and everybody can do it, etc., etc. And what Belinda alluded to, and what I absolutely support, is that there's really lacking South African local indigenous values to or elements to what you can get in literature and on the internet and so on. So I think there's a wonderful opportunity to collaborate around something. But what's your views? I mean, where do you?
I totally agree, and that's why I wanted to get Sipiwe, because she has all the wisdom of the African nation, and that's why connect her together. So maybe if this is a good start. But I think still need to collaborate with Sipiwe and then come from it. Not that I'm saying this was not worthy. This was very knowledgeable, not just to me, but to I hope to the viewers that's watching this thing. And yes, and we can collaborate and do and see what comes from it as we go. No. So
you talk about lost crops. There are 3 books that are not in print anymore. They call them the Lost Crops of Africa. There's a book on grains, there's a book on fruit, and then there's a fruits, vegetables, and grains. So there's 3 books. And you won't believe it, but I actually have the PDF formats for all the books. And they are the most amazing books. They actually call them the lost crops of Africa. And lots of the books, when you're paging through them, you would recognize the plant. You just didn't know what its uses were. So this book actually has the plant, the uses, what you would use it for. And those are the things you should be going back to. So maybe get those books, try and get some of those back into circulation would be great. As I said, it's called The Lost Crops of Africa.
Cool.
Nicely, I'm sure I could send you the PDF formats of those. But really, a really interesting read. And yeah, it just goes to show how we've digressed. I mean, people want kohlrabies. Now, I don't know if you know what kohlrabi is. Kohlrabi is a Russian turnip type of thing. Chris, do you know what a kohlrabi is?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. A very high value crop. So if you were going into commercial or trying to supply, you would get a really good price for your kohlrabis. But it's not for South Africa. A kohlrabi is not a South African thing. It's a Russian thing. And, you know, our staple foods, we should go back to our staple foods, growing sorghums and millets and, you know, grains and cereals like that. Instead of wanting Kellogg's All Bran Flakes or something like that. You know, making our own cereals from using sorghums and millets. Grains that would just produce anyway, would just come up. We had students on one of our courses recently, and I was talking about alfalfa. And I said to her, oh, well, the common name is lucerne. And she looked at me with this dumbstruck on her face, and she said to me, are you telling me alfalfa is lucerne? I said to her, yes, alfalfa's lucerne. And she's going, no. I said, I promise you it is. And we searched, and she said, no, she couldn't, she's never ever known. And she's not a young woman anymore. And she said she never knew that was the same thing. Alfalfa was lucerne. And there it goes, and that's another maybe topic of conversation, is the greenwashing out there. You know, sell it for what it is, not for a fancy name and then add an extra 10 Rand onto it. Sell it for what it is. Yeah, education. It goes back to that whole education.
So I'm going to just stop at this topic because time, I have a Zoom thing that only allows 4 minutes over. So I'm just going to stop here for now for this viewing, and then we can repeat the other one and then add on to this one. So is there...
Maybe just, I know we're right on the end, but what I really appreciated from this discussion, and maybe we should package it and such, is, you know, within the permaculture principles, you know, much of the discussion was on the first principle, observe and interact. And I think what you know, what we maybe can do is let's use those 12 principles as sort of our a benchmark going forward. You know, if we say, all right, well, even if we have to observe and interact more to get a good feel for it, you know, but in the end, the second one is catch and store energy. And I think what we're getting to the point is where Belinda, you sort of telling us, listen, let's catch and store the indigenous local food energy. Yes. And yeah, I very much like that. But Lynn dee, thank you. Sorry, I just had to chip in with that.
No, it's fine. Belinda, do you want to add anything? You have a minute.
And the time starts now.
Yeah, go.
No. Lynn dee, yeah, I must be honest, you are the key to all of this, and thank you for opening it up for us. And as I said, maybe what we should do is, on a private thing, is actually just discuss our weaknesses and our strengths. Lynn dee knows what one of my weaknesses are, but I'm happy to do and share whatever knowledge I have, and maybe we just need a platform to where that knowledge can be obtainable to the people. So we can get some interest going through that. So Lynn dee, I'm sure you're capable of doing something like that. Doesn't look like you've got anything else to do.
Yeah, sure. So on that note, I'm just going to close this discussion. I'm going to say bye to the viewers.
Bye. Thanks, guys.
Wait.
Thanks.
Goodbye.